Shabbos. This week's portion is Bahaloscha, and one of the passages in this week's portion calls out for commentary. The Jews have been taken out of Egypt, saved from slavery. Their enemies have been dealt a terrible blow. They're now wandering in the desert and on their way to the land of Israel, their homeland. God is giving them water and man from the heaven. And what do? They complain. They say, we're tired of the man. And what is their complaint? It says, Zacharnu es hadaga shanocha b'Mitzrayim. We remember the fish which we ate in Egypt chinam, for free. Es hakeshuim v'savtichim v'sachotzer v'sapitzalim v'shashumim. We remember the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. This seems to be very odd. They were slaves. They were beaten. They were tortured. Their lives were always threatened. And yet they're remembering the cucumbers and the garlic. And I think it's somewhat obvious, but this is a problem that we all have. We all have these false memories. We all have this nostalgia for the past, which we grab onto because we're afraid of the future. We're afraid of taking responsibility. We're afraid of moving forward. We don't know what the future holds, so we run back to the past and grab onto it, even though the past really didn't have much for us. It reminds me of what many Jewish people speak about when they think about Europe of years gone by. And they have this idyllic past of the Jews in the shtetl. But the Jews in the shtetl didn't have it easy. The Jews in the shtetl were poor. They were impoverished. There were pogroms. They were always living at the whim of whoever was ruling at that time. Their future was uncertain. And even in religious, in the religious sort of realm, there was also major problems. There was communism that was rising, and the youth were grabbing onto these new ideas. They were running away from religion. We think about the yeshivas of old, and we talk about them with we remember them with how beautiful they were and how full of the voice of Torah. And then you realize that there were very few students. In proportion to the population, there weren't that many students, especially since the population of the Jewish population in those countries was much larger. There wasn't as much as we thought, and they were on a decline. And when they did run away and they ran to the Golden Medina, they ran to the United States or Canada, people were throwing their tefillin over the side of the boat. They were free from religion. Their religion might have been very superficial. It might have only been on the surface. It might not be something which really was held very close to them. They didn't really fully understand it. And they weren't taking on the challenges that the modern era had brought upon them. And therefore, they were prone to all kinds of ideas and moving in all different directions and forgetting their past, forgetting their Yiddishkeit, forgetting their religion. And perhaps Judaism might not have had a great future. But we still remember it as an ideal and this idyllic past that our grandparents lived. And we're all like that. We remember our youth sometimes, and we create either false memories or very selective memories. I remember going back to the small town where I live and realized it was a small town. I thought of it as much larger. I thought of it as grander and more idyllic. And the truth is, it wasn't. It wasn't a fantastic place. It didn't suffer, but it wasn't what I really thought it was. And that's a lot of our past, and we have this fear of the future. It reminds me also of the Neturei Karta, those very vehement anti-Zionists that say, well, we have the state of Israel, and look at all the trouble we have. We lived in peace with the Arabs before Zionism came about. That's not really what happened. It was not an easy life, and it wasn't always so simple. But they like to remember what they want to remember because they have an ideology and they're afraid to move forward. That's the truth. They're afraid of the future. They're only grabbing on to what they remember or what they want to remember of the past. And on the one hand, that has a benefit because sometimes memories are so difficult. We don't want to drudge up these horrible memories. It's better to have selective memories and remember the good things of the past so that we don't let that torture us. But on the other hand, by looking always towards the past, we are not taking responsibility for the future. And that's exactly what happened to the Jews in the desert. They were sitting there thinking, we're going to Israel. We're going to have to work on our own, establish our own country, create our own future. And they were fearful. And therefore they remembered the past. And they said, slavery might not have been as bad as we thought it was. But of course, it's a mistake. And what happens is, it says, Vayichar af Hashem, God gets angry. And Moshe sees it as a very disturbing element that he actually starts despairing as a result. I think the message for us is quite simple, that we always have to try to remember the past in a way which gives us a strong foundation, but make sure that we never look at the past as that's as far as we can go. We always have to move into the future. We always have to see what we can do in our next step. In Israel today, it's good to be able to say things were better before 1967 or right after the war in 1967, and now things are so bad. But we could look for the future and say, no, now we have a startup nation, we have a strong Israel, we have a strong people, we have a great economy, and we have troubles, and we have an uncertain future. But we have to be able to look towards the future and say, we can grow, we could move forward, we could take the benefits that we have and the grace of God that we have, just like they had. God was giving them man from the heavens. We have to say, we have to be thankful for what we have and be able to move towards the future with confidence. And that's what we could pass on to the next generation. We have to be certain that we always able to shoulder the responsibility of what is required of us to move forward. Good Shabbos.